says that I'm submitting this and I hereby do something state or declare, whatever it is, that if in the future your company were to make a film which had the same storyline, I have no right to protest. I have no right to go to court. I have to sign that. This is a large company we're talking about. What was crazy, of course I wouldn't sign it, I mean I'm experienced enough, but I found a whole lot of people, and because I teach, a whole lot of ex-students who didn't know better. Because they felt this was the norm. They were convinced by the studio, of course this is the norm. This is what you have to sign. This is what happens. Because tomorrow morning I don't want a case, from you coming against me when I'm just close to release because you guys blackmail me, you're thugs, this, that. So this is how it is. So he didn't know better. So he signed that. That is number one. Number two clause, Madhukar, is that this is really laughable. One of those corporations, I haven't seen the contracts of the others yet fully, though I am at the moment investigating. The actual contract which you sign, which means that after they've approved of your script, and okay, fine. In that it says, henceforth, all the revised drafts that you will write will not be registered in your name. It will be registered in the name of the company. Which means that effectively they are saying that they have written it, which means they are actually taking away the copyright through that contract. It's invalid in law, of course. I mean, this can be thrown into smithereens. But the fact is this, if after the amendment has been done, this is a proper legal contract that large corporations, at least one of them, is making writers sign. And I found 2 ex-students who had actually signed it. I said, are you nuts? So we had to take it up union to union. I mean, Arun would be happy to know that when we're also getting now pretty proactive as a union, which we have been over the last 4 years, to take it up and actually fight this out that you can't do that. And then if need be, we'll have to sort of work out means of collective bargaining, protest, etc., etc. But I'm saying this is prevalent. So when you say, don't talk about mindsets of bonded labor, this, that, etc. No, I didn't mean to be dramatic about that at all. As soon as I finish, yes, of course you can respond. I didn't mean to be dramatic by saying that, oh, we are all sort of, I'm a bonded laborer and you're a zamindar. Not at all. But I'm saying there are certain residual mindsets which are still prevalent, unfortunately. And that is precisely why negotiation becomes difficult. Okay, because they approach it with, okay, what is the concession that you want? It's not about concession that I want. I have something to give, you have something to take. I have something which you need, you have something which I need. It is a professional contract. The culture has to be that, the negotiation has to be on a certain equitability. That mindset I'm talking about. And it was absent on either side. Javed Saab didn't ask for royalties. I mean, he gave some series of some super hit films, etc. He hasn't received 1 paisa of royalties. When this whole negotiation was going on, when Mr. Sibal was there, the new copyright registrar Raghavendra was there in one of these large hotels where stakeholders, I mean, all the writers and musicians and lyricists on one side and the producers on that side. Oh, it was acrimonious as hell at that time, because though that lobby refused to act, one of them stood up, a respectable producer from the south stood up and he said, if this act goes through, not only will the southern film industry close down completely, but we will commit mass suicide. I mean, this is, you're talking about drama, there's drama for you. Okay. There, I remember Yash Chopra, may his soul rest in peace, took me aside and he said, Anjum, what you're doing actually is very destructive. I said, please explain to me, sir. He said, we run like a family. Okay, and this whole film industry is like a family. That's how it's always been. With you bringing in this so-called professionalization, etc., you're actually destroying the sentiment which glues us together. And he gave me an example that a particular film of his, which wasn't expected to become a hit film, it became a hit film and started doing rather well. He said, on my own, I actually called the writer and I gave him 10 lakh of rupees as a bonus, that this is my reward. I said, well, I am very pleased that you are so generous, but it is not, we are not here to actually any longer bank on the generosity of producers. We want it as a right, because that value has been created by the writer. Okay, he wrote that. That thing did well. That means it attracted a certain kind of value for you. I think he's entitled to a certain share of it. We can do it in the most respectful way if you want. But it's becoming acrimonious, then we have to shout. But this is, I'm saying, there is a certain kind of sentiment which has been there, so-called. What don't understand that in a large family there are also poor cousins. That's drama, who live in the outhouse.
Particular thing. I mean, again, I would say that perhaps you are a very honorable departure from the rule. Most of the people here are very young, but I think some people who would be my age, and perhaps there would be a couple who would be my father's age, they would remember a song called Aayega Aane Wala Aayega, film Mahal. Wonder if you've heard this, Lata Mangeshkar. Okay,
Khemchand Prakash.
Khemchand Prakash, and the story of Khemchand Prakash is amazing. I mean, very sad. When Khemchand Prakash died, not many people knew that he was dead. That Khemchand Prakash had a wife. People presumed, of course, he would have had a wife. Where she was living, nobody knew. And then suddenly, somebody, Good Samaritan or for any kind of publicity reasons, they tracked down Khemchand Prakash's wife. She was living in a slum outside Dadar railway station. And here was, this particular song is considered to be one of the most beautiful compositions of all times in Hindi film industry, and this is what was happening to his estate, his heirs. So I'm certain that you are a very honorable exception to this business, but that appeared to be the norm. The second point that I'd like to make in this context, where I would give credit for the method that was followed during the amendments, the consultations, the wide-ranging consultations that we held, I will give credit to my late boss, Mr. Sudeep Banerjee, who was the Secretary for Higher Education to the Government of India, who insisted that we should have a round of consultations going to all the cities, and he himself traveled to Mumbai to interact. Of course, it possibly helped that Mr. Javed Akhtar was a personal friend of his. And would you believe it? We could not meet in any neutral location within the city. We had to finally find a place in the auditorium of the Department of Management Studies, Shailesh J. Mehta School of Management Studies in IIT Powai. Okay. Because there was no way we could have met. The artists were scared to come out. They wouldn't come out to talk about their problems with the music companies. And so we had to keep it very hush-hush. And when we reached there, then I get a call from one gentleman on my mobile, and well, I will not take his name, except that he is a rather robust-looking gentleman in the music industry. And he called me up and he said, "You are holding a set of consultations about the music industry in the context of copyrights, and you've not invited us?" I said, "I'm not bound to invite you." He said, "No, you have no right to exclude us." I said, "I'm sorry, I can exclude anyone I want to. You are not the constituency the government is wanting to talk to. You have access. You walk into my room, you walk into the minister's room, you have access to the minister. These people want to talk. I want the names of the people who are there." I said, "I'm sorry, I can't give it to you." I told Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee used some, God rest his soul, he used some colorful language where this gentleman should go to. Okay. So what I'm saying, I'm not talking about zamindari, I'm not talking about bonded labor, but I'm talking about a kind of a reign of terror that existed. Okay. And there we had these artists, composers, a few very famous, now very famous music directors. And I said, "Thank you for giving us this opportunity." And then we asked for a group photograph at the end of the session, and they said, no photographs, please. So that's also a mindset.
Let me respond. I am not aware of the Bollywood workings. I can say this for the South Indian music industry. To a large extent, this is not the case there at all.
Madhukar, let's go to the implications of the...
Yeah, Professor Gopalakrishnan, and then I would ask Pulak to say, is he happy with the amendments the way they are?
I just want to respond to the question of who has been covered and not covered. It's interesting if you read section 18, you have literary or musical work, both in case of cinematograph film as well as in case of sound recording. If you move on to 19, then 8 and 9, subclass 8 and 9, you see any work included in. Now, irrespective of the music composers and lyricists really pushing it, the Act has not discriminated anyone. in terms of really bringing in under the umbrella of protection. When you use the word literary, literary has been defined in the Act. Well, in the context of film, it can be a script writer, it can be a dialogue writer, even in dramatic work, because the acting forms, the skin and other things. Of course, in the musical context, it becomes lyricist as well as music composers, because the musical work includes the notations, because you have a definition for musical work as well as literary work. So in fact, it did address every player who contributes to the making of the film or making of a musical work, and the type of imbalances which the law want to address. I think basically, as I responded earlier, it makes people to come to the table, because it's impossible for the legislator to legislate every nitty-gritty of the functioning of an industry to become really a healthy industry, if I want to call it. It's a transition that the law is addressing. So it ended with in a new set of practice that the industry needs to follow if the industry needs to grow. Well, the family affair which was being talked about, though I use the word feudal, unfortunately, but I don't know whether it is the right terminology which I use. I keep using it by saying it was feudal. And then, you see, you ask the question at what point of time film industry has been declared as an industry, and what is the reason for it? It's a couple of years back after we have opened up. Otherwise, film industry was never recognized as an industry for the purpose of doing it. But then the last 10-15 years of movement of the industry has not seen a matured industrial practices that crept into the industry. Seems to be the reason behind it. So there is, just I want to highlight is there is no exclusion of anybody though they were not in the scene, because the law was trying to look at it as its totality of the people who are playing into the making of the film. The unfortunate part is the director. And there is a long story which Madhukar knows better than me.
So, pull a couple of things. The general perception about the broadcasting industry is that these are big people. They have a lot of money. They create very trashy Saas Bahu kind of stories only. Yet they seem to have captured the imagination of the audience. And they seem very cagey about talking about how they have benefited or not benefited from the amendments. Because really speaking, we have had this group fighting, and Prashant has gone away. But you all are keeping a very strategic silence on this. So are you happy or you are unhappy with the... Can I provoke you into saying that you are happy?
Well, the idiot box is certainly a very serious business. I can assure you that. We have taken a measured approach to say that it may be too early for us to commit to any particular position, because while the act is welcome, it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, and that's where the questions really, the concerns really stem from. So while you have, formulations like licensing, assignment, you have also restrictions on future technologies, you also have fragmentation of rights in that, it's no longer a single point negotiation, it's a multi-point negotiation. We are really waiting for it to actually pan out on the ground, and we really have no clue as to how these mechanisms will be put in place. So I think our silence is more informed by concern rather than, any impact or likely impact that we perceive to be happening immediately. I don't see that happening immediately. But yes, there were concerns, and I'm thankful to Madhukar, in that the entire process was conducted in a fairly transparent manner. We can't expect perfections, and there will be some quarters of imperfections, but the way the entire amendments were approached, it was really a welcome step, because it really recognizes, as Anjum says, the problems cannot really be shoved under a carpet. They were there very much, and I agree with Anjum fully. But the answer is, or rather the question is, whether these amendments, how far will it be efficacious in addressing those issues? So Anjum really talked about, producers, giving him a rough time. But whether that producer will be now substituted by another monster, is that the question? whether the amendments will really give out solutions to what Anjum really wishes for. That is something which only time will tell. And we can only wait and watch and see how, the mechanics really pan out. But there is a palpable fear also. Because when we negotiate with rights holders, what we are seeing is too much of iteration, of contracts going to and fro, of very seldom, things coming to a proper closure. There are always issues, there are always talking points, there are always concerns. So very little action is happening on the ground. And that is the worry for the creative industry and the television fraternity today. That are we going to end up only negotiating, only bargaining, only litigating with very little substance underneath?
And Rajesh, do you think you are happy with the amendments?
Yes, we are happy with the amendments per se, but how these amendments are going to roll out as practicalities and how these amendments are going to create avenues for the revenue to come into, and beyond all this, I would like to reiterate that the music industry and the film industry is bound to grow. Music is a part of our lives, and come what may, the music industry and the film industry, by the music industry and the film industry, I mean all the shareholders together, the writers, the composers, the labels, the publishers, all we are going to churn out some process by which we all are able to go ahead and forward.
Anjum, your take on this?
Well, undoubtedly, on balance, we are rather pleased with that, and I'm very grateful also to the wisdom, the vision, and the sensitivity of Professor NSG. I mean, he may not remember, but we had a very, very long chat on the phone. Raghavendra had put me on to you, and you had very graciously agreed to speak with. About an hour or so we spoke about that. So, yes, there are some ambiguities which are there, and as I said, that the whole screenwriting scenario, Madhukar, is quite complicated, unfortunately. And that, while I agree with Professor NSG that scriptwriters, of course, have been included under the umbrella of these amendments, but it's just that those vicissitudes are a little complicated. So they will need bargaining, they will need some negotiation, discussion, etc. So Kulak is saying that, will we just go on doing that? I think, Kulak, we need to make up for what we have not done all these years. Had we been doing that, then we would have been much more ready to receive these amendments. But anyway, we can make a beginning, and I don't see it as an unending series of merely discussions, but I think there is a concrete agenda, there are concrete differences which are all ironable. So I am very optimistic, even in the way in which we will deal. So yes, on balance, I feel it is good, and it is, I entirely agree with Professor NSG's sentiment here, that a society which finally sort of wakes up and learns to acknowledge the artist, okay, in this case, creator of copyright, producing an artist, appreciates the person, gives the artist a certain profile, rewards him or her for the kind of work that he has actually generated, and so therefore his contact with the public increases. People are able to also recognize that, okay, these are the people who are creating that. It does give a huge impetus. I mean, everybody knows, but I have experienced it also because I come from that community. That, acknowledgement, apart from the other things like royalties and money and material dues, etc., is hugely important. It's like 50% of the motivation actually comes from the fact that, people are aware that, okay, this lyricist has written that, so let's look out for his songs. That's a huge encouragement, and I feel the Act has done a stellar service, a revolutionary service, I think, exceptionally so, in imparting that to it. And therefore, I see only hope. I feel that this is going to do wonders for the film. And no matter, as Arun said, that the producers are all rather upset, etc. But the producers have always been upset. They always complain. So as I told you, they wanted to commit suicide. So I feel it's a very, very positive step. It's a historic step which has happened. We're all very happy with it. Now we need to iron out the implications of this in a reasonable and civilized way and an equitable way.
I did see gentleman there, very keen to ask a question. Were you meaning to ask a question?
Actually, it's not a question.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get you a mic, then all of us will be able to hear your observation. And we have about 5 minutes. So after this, if the students have any questions, because I think the experts have questions in any case, if the students have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
I am Gautam, working in intellectual property for a few years now from Kaitan and Company. Mine is not a question basically, it's really sharing my part of experience regarding this dominant position. I would not go into calling those terms like feudalism, labor, etc. But what my experience was definitely the terminology would be misuse of dominant position by the music industry. To share my experience, my wife is a performer in music, Rabindra Sangeet. To our understanding, sings fairly well. We approached one of the premier labels. Same things have been told. There are 2-3 colors. One first stance has been taken that due to piracy we are not venturing into new albums and all, quite understandable. Secondly, I'll come to the second part later on. After a week we found in a very good music store some of my contemporary, fortunately or unfortunately, I also passed out in music from a premier institute. Some of my colleagues who are even junior to my wife, CDs coming from that label. So the real story has not been told. Where these upcoming musicians who doesn't have the backing will go. Second point is then we have to resort to some new music company, new label who agreed to release the CDs, and again this contract part came in. We didn't have a choice. Had we not signed that contract with all rights given to that music companies, performance right and all, the CD of my wife would not have come out, not have seen the light of the day. That is one part. So I would term it as dominant misuse